Hello, Gene Schwimmer here. Welcome to today's vlog. I first need to do a clarification. Well, it's not a clarification, it's an update. Yesterday, I was reporting about the release of the Trump deal of the century, the Palestinian-Israeli peace plan. I had said yesterday that the reaction to the release of the plan was muted in the Palestinian Authority area and in Gaza. I double-checked today, and that was in fact what was being reported yesterday. But now today, well, let me put up the headline. Hamas calls for mass demonstrations, West Bank clashes intensify. So I don't know at this point what's going on in Gaza, but it looks like there has been an outbreak of violence in the Palestinian Authority area, Judea and Samaria. So I just wanted to give you that update. It's not really a correction because I double checked and that was what they were reporting yesterday, but that's not the situation today. So I wanted to give you an update in my efforts always to be timely and accurate. And now on to the next subject, which is about Independence Day. Tomorrow is Independence Day. Yeah. Well, you're probably wondering, is it the 4th of July tomorrow? I can tell you it's not because it's freezing outside. I'm not talking about our independence. I am talking about our friends across the pond, as they say among our friends on the other side of the pond, otherwise known as the Atlantic Ocean. Tomorrow is Brexit, January 31st, Friday at 11 p.m. London time. Britain leaves the European Union, becomes an independent country once again. So I just want to, well, I'm sure everybody will join me. Well, maybe not if there are some remainers there, people who lament the UK leaving the EU. But for the rest of us, or for me at least, congratulations. Enjoy your new liberty. It may be a little tough at first, though I read in one place that your economy will actually do better. You'll be better off almost immediately being out of the European Union. But in any case, there could be some growing pains, but you have to remember that my country had some significant growing pains when we left when we left the United Kingdom. When the Barbary pirates started raiding our ships, taking the crews hostage, holding them for ransom, it suddenly became clear that the British Navy that we freed ourselves from, they were no longer available to us for our protection. Oh, and 8,000 Americans died in the Revolutionary War. I don't think anybody died in your fight for liberty. So just be optimistic. I see a bright future ahead for you. So today I want to talk about a gentleman, you may be familiar with him, Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage, you could almost call him the father of Brexit. He was the person who really played an instrumental part in getting England to the referendum that they had in 2016 to make that happen. To get to that referendum, needless to say, he was pleased as punch when the Brexiteers won, but very disappointed when the will of the British people was not implemented, when the British government did everything to thwart the will of the British people. It took 3 years to finally elect a parliament, overwhelmingly, by the way, in Boris Johnson, a prime minister who would carry out the will of the people. So all I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you a couple of videos. I've linked to them, but they're really just videos of Nigel Farage. The first one, well, let's take them one at a time. So the first one is an interview with Nigel Farage explaining the decisive moment that caused him to conclude that Britain had to leave the European Union. Watch that video and then I'll introduce the second video.
The low point came when, after a lengthy constitutional convention, a European constitution was drafted. And the French had a referendum on this. Now, I took part in the French referendum. In fact, I used a very large chunk of European Parliament money from their information budget, which they design for MEPs to sell how good the EU is. Well, I used it in France and later on in Ireland to send out lots of literature to households. And I was in Paris on the night, and the French voted no to the Constitution. And a few days later I was in Brussels, and the Dutch had a referendum, and they overwhelmingly voted against the European Constitution. And we were in the press bar having the most enormous party. And I genuinely felt at that moment we'd stopped the process of European centralisation. And at that moment of celebration, walking down the corridor past the bar was a German socialist MEP called Joe Leinen. He's still here. Great friend of Giscard d'Estaing's, one of the men that helped draft the European Constitution. And I sort of half-jokingly said, will you join us for a glass of champagne to celebrate this outbreak of democracy? And he looked at me and he said, you may have your little party. You may think this is a victory, but we have 50 different ways to win. And it kind of just all drained from me, and I realised how fanatical these people were. Within a few weeks, they'd rebranded the Constitution as the Lisbon Treaty. They boasted that the beauty of that is, as it was a treaty, not a constitution, it wouldn't need to be put to referendums. They didn't surrender a single power. And I remember that for me was the moment when I went from being not just a believer that the UK was a square peg in a round hole and that we should leave. That was the moment I became an outright opponent of the whole European Union.
Welcome back. Let me just make a couple of comments because I see parallel with our situation here. The European Union supporters are basically liberals. They show a remarkable, or maybe, well, not so remarkable, parallel with the liberals over here, which is to thwart the will of the people, to arrogate more power to a centralized government. In Britain's case, it was the European Union. In our case, it's the federal government in Washington. You see all these attempts to, well, just as Nigel Farage explained, replacing, when referendums turned down the proposed constitution for the European Union, they turned it into a treaty that could be passed by the legislatures without needing a vote of the people. You see in our country now, among our Democratic friends, attempts to add justices to the Supreme Court, to stack the Supreme Court, to get rid of the Electoral College, all to thwart the will of the 50 states, to turn us into just a central government divided into 50 geographical areas, which is not the history of our country. We started with the individual states. The individual states formed the federal government, and they were very jealous of giving up any of their power to a central government. That's why we were, for 10 years after the revolution, under the Articles of Confederation, which created a very weak central government, and unfortunately too weak. For instance, the federal government under the Articles of Confederation did not have a standing army. That's just one example. A number of deficiencies that the Founding Fathers gathered in Philadelphia to solve, and decided that the deficiencies were so bad that they had to just tear up the Articles of Confederation and just start all over, and that's how we got our Constitution. So I see a lot of parallels there. I'm going to go now to Nigel Farage's farewell speech, his final speech in the European Union. It speaks for itself. It really, I'm an admirer, or you could say a fan of Nigel Farage. He's just such a good debater, and he just has a way of just making points. He is so eloquent. And, well, just watch the video and then come back for my final comment, and fare thee well until the next vlog.
Thank you, Mr. Farage, for 4 minutes.
Thank you very much.
So this is it, the final chapter, the end of the road. A 47-year political experiment that the British, frankly, have never been very happy with. My mother and father signed up to a common market, not to a political union, not to flags, anthems, presidents, and now you even want your own army. For me, it's been 27 years of campaigning and over 20 years here in this Parliament. I'm not particularly happy with the agreement we're being asked to vote on tonight, but Boris has been remarkably bold in the last few months, and Ms von der Leyen, he's made it clear, he's promised us there'll be no level playing field. And on that basis, I wish him every success in the next round of negotiations, I really do. But the most significant point is this. What happens at 11 p.m. this Friday, the 31st of January 2020, marks the point of no return. Once we've left, we are never coming back, and the rest, frankly, is detail. We're going, we will be gone. And that should be the summit of my own political ambitions. I walked in here, as I've said before, you all thought it was terribly funny. You stopped laughing in 2016. But my view has changed of Europe since I joined. In 2005, I saw the constitution that had been drafted by Giscard and others. I saw it rejected by the French in a referendum. I saw it rejected by the Dutch in a referendum. And I saw you in these institutions ignore them, bring it back as the Lisbon Treaty and boast you could ram it through without there being referendums. Well, the Irish did have a vote and did say no and were forced to vote again. You're very good at making people vote again, but what we've proved is the British are too big to bully, thank goodness. So I became an outright opponent of the entire European project. I want Brexit to start a debate across the rest of Europe. What do we want from Europe? If we want trade, friendship, cooperation, reciprocity, we don't need a European Commission. We don't need a European Court. We don't need these institutions and all of this power. And I can promise you, both in UKIP and indeed in the Brexit Party, we love Europe. We just hate the European Union. It's as simple as that. So I'm hoping this begins the end of this project. It's a bad project. It isn't just undemocratic, it's anti-democratic, and it puts in that front row. It gives people power without accountability. People who cannot be held to account by the electorate. And that is an unacceptable structure. Indeed, there's an historic battle going on now across the West, in Europe, America, and elsewhere. It is globalism against populism. And you may loathe populism, but I tell you a funny thing, it's becoming very popular. And it has great benefits. No more financial contributions, no more European Court of Justice, no more common fisheries policy, no more being talked down to, no more being bullied, no more Guy Verhofstadt. I mean, what's not to like? I know you're going to miss us. I know you want to ban our national flags, but we're going to wave you goodbye. And we'll look forward in the future to working with you as sovereign.
If you disobey the rules, you get cut off. Could we please remove the flags? Mr Farage, could we remove the flags, please?
That's it, it's all over. Finished. It's gone.
Could I please ask for quiet? Please sit down, resume your seats, put your flags away, you're leaving, and take them with you if you are leaving now. And goodbye. Can I just say, If I may say, just in a slight reference.
Welcome back. Nothing to add to that video except just to say once again, congratulations, Your Majesty. Congratulations to all of your subjects. You should look forward to a great future. We over here in America are looking forward to accomplishing many great things together, the two of us as two independent and sovereign countries. I am especially optimistic, in addition to predicting your success, I am optimistic that your success will inspire other countries to leave the European Union and, like Britain, have some wonderful agreements with my country, the United States. And as Nigel Farage said in his farewell speech to the European Union, I don't hate Europe. I love Europe, most of it, put it that way. But I don't hate Europe. I just hate the European Union. I do, even though I was never in the European Union, or America was never in the European Union, but it is my opinion that the whole purpose of the European Union, it was originally just a trading bloc, but it's turned into a super state that would have, well, it has its own currency, it has a flag, it has a national anthem. You saw how there's actually a rule in the European Union that none of the country members are allowed to display their national flags. You can see what happened when the Brits displayed their national flags. They want their own flag. Well, they have their own flag, the European Union flag, and they have a national anthem, and it looks like they want an army. The whole purpose of that, make no mistake, is to challenge the United States, which means that the European Union, if that were ever to happen, could challenge us and thwart our national policies. That is why I hate the European Union. It's obvious that Nigel Farage hates the European Union too, but for different reasons. But we both share hatred of the European Union and love of each other's countries. And that's it for today. I'll leave you with that happy thought. As usual, thumbs up if you like this video. Share it with anybody you think would also like the video. You can put any comments you might have in the comment section below the video, as well as any questions you might have or suggestions for future topics. You could subscribe. I love getting subscribers, so subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. And finally, come back and see me again. I look forward to seeing all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.